Good afternoon. It's 1 p.m. here in Kenya's capital, Nairobi, and this is The Ambassador with me, your Ambassador Paul Mathenge. This is where we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics. Now let's kick off what's happening. Sudan is marking 2 years since the outbreak of the devastating civil war that began on April 15, 2023, between the Sudanese armed forces and the paramilitary rapid support forces. This conflict has led to catastrophic consequences for the country and its people, resulting in one of the world's worst humanitarian crises. The conflict has so far caused tens of thousands of deaths, with estimates suggesting over 200,000 civilian casualties from violence and famine combined. More than 15 million people have been displaced internally or as refugees, marking the largest displacement crisis globally. Over 30 million Sudanese now require humanitarian assistance, with widespread hunger, collapsing health systems, water scarcity, halted education for millions of children, and soaring sexual and gender-based violence. The RSF has been accused of committing atrocities, including genocide, particularly in the Darfur region, with systematic executions and targeted sexual violence against specific ethnic groups. Recent escalations include brutal attacks on displacement camps such as Zamzam in North Darfur.
لكن خيار تفاوض ده أنا في نظري غايته مع الناس زي المشاهد في خيار تفاوض رغم التأثيرات ورغم الشيء اللي حصل وأنا يعني عارف إنه في معاناة كثيرة جدا حصلت للناس، ناس فقدت أموال وفقدت أرواحها وفقدت يعني أغلى ما عندها.
الوضع هسه الحمد لله يعني ما أقول لك يعني 100 لكن الحمد لله يعني ماشي كويس بالنسبة للوضع العام ماشي كويس. لكن بالنسبة للماديات الوضع صعب شوية يعني الوضع صعب للشعب السوداني عامة يعني لا أنا برأيي لا غير يعني.
والله أنا أمنياتي إنه الناس البلد السودان بأمانة يرجعوا خاصة الشباب ممكن أقول إنه هي دعوة للشباب لأنه هم يرجعوا عارفة إنه ممكن تكون ما في شغل ما في
As the number of displaced people worldwide continues to rise, the International Monetary Fund is urging countries to rethink their approach to migration. In a new report, the International Monetary Fund highlights how refugees and migrants, when integrated with the right policies, can strengthen labor markets, increase tax revenues, and drive long-term economic growth. Teresa Chengo reports.
Monetary Fund's 2025 World Economic Outlook has spotted migration and refugee policies as key drivers of long-term economic growth. In its newly released chapter, the International Monetary Fund emphasizes that when managed effectively, migration can expand labor markets, increase tax revenue, and stimulate economic growth.
I think the evidence is very clear that refugees don't have to be a burden. And that's something that the report also points to. And with the right policies in place, refugees can in fact contribute to an economy. They can bolster the labor supply.
Health and employment policies that include migrants, especially as demographic shifts intensify.
What we see is that governments wishing to develop well-managed migration policies will have to consider the links between mobility and development in a number of contexts, such as whether and to what extent migrants are included in their health policies, for example, or, talking about displacement, when displacement is included in risk reduction strategies.
With 90% of future global population growth expected in just 26 countries, mainly in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, while 76 others face decline, forward-thinking labor market planning and investment in skills are seen as essential. Together, these organizations are calling for a shift in global thinking from seeing migration as a problem to managing it as an opportunity. Teresa Chengo, GBS News.
Peruvian former First Lady Nana Jan Heredia, sentenced with her husband to 15 years in prison for money laundering, is in Brazil, where she has been granted asylum, officials said. Heredia, 48 years, and ex-President Ollanta Humala were sentenced Tuesday after being convicted of grant linked to a globe-spanning corruption scandal involving Brazilian construction group Odebrecht paying bribes to politicians. The pair were found guilty of receiving illegal contributions from Odebrecht and the Venezuela government in 2 presidential campaigns. Humala, 62 years, was taken into custody in the courtroom after the verdict was read out and jailed to a police base. His lawyer said they will file a appeal against his conviction. A judge ordered the arrest of Heredia, who did not attend the sentencing hearing and instead went to the Brazil embassy in Lima. She was granted safe passage by the government of President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva. The World Trade Organization has warned that global trade in goods is expected to decline this year, largely due to the ongoing trade tensions between the United States and China and President Trump's charging tariff policies. The World Trade Organization cautioned that if the United States moves forward with its toughest tariffs, the global trade outlook could worsen as uncertainty continues to weigh on business and global economic growth.
The World Trade Organization has warned that global trade in goods is expected to decline by 0.2% this year, largely due to U.S. President Donald Trump's changing tariff policies and ongoing trade disputes, particularly with China. The World Trade Organization had initially expected trade to grow in 2025 and 2026, but the trade war has forced a significant downgrade of its projections. If Trump follows through with his most severe tariffs, global trade could drop by as much as 1.5%, as the uncertainty surrounding his policies continue to disrupt business operations and trade flows. Despite a temporary 90-day suspension of the toughest tariffs, which allow over 70 countries to address U.S. trade concerns, the World Trade Organization warns that the ongoing uncertainty will continue to harm global growth. World Trade Organization Director General Ngozi expressed concern that this uncertainty could have particularly severe consequences for vulnerable economies, with the chief economist emphasizing that trade policy uncertainty has a significant negative effect on trade, reducing exports and weakening economic activity, with tariffs often having unintended consequences. Teresa Tiengo, GBS News.
The ambassador will take a short break. We will be right back with more as we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics.
And the question of the day is, can you survive without internet?
Ngumu, plus kwa chile hizo story tu zote zikupite ni ngori. Mwambie ukweli. Like hii ni kama kuambia mtu mwenye alikuwa amezoea kushindana nguo, mwambie toa nguo ushinde uchi. Hiyo huku atriki kwa sababu sasa like ilikuwa imekuingia kwa kichwa kabisa.
Sasa unaweza kaa holi ya bila simu.
Kuspend hii most of the time kwa simu. Also you need to run skills. So nilipata na later hapa nikapo-apply huko and then I started learning skills. Okay. Digital skills.
Yes, hadi siku mbili haiwezi.
Kwa wiki naachilia hata kama ni siku mbili ama sometimes na extend to wiki nzima. Napata shiki simu yangu.
My name is Tracy Otonde. I'm Miss County Nairobi, and I'm also Miss Embakasi East. Modeling is an art by virtue of the model and by virtue of the designers. That's if we look at modeling in terms of pageantry, you're showcasing yourself. You yourself is a work of art. You're a work of art, and you're showcasing everything that's in you and within you. And by virtue of the designer is because you keep showcasing the attires that they're made for you, and you have to look the part for you to be able to showcase what the designer was picturing. So yeah, modeling is an art.
Everywhere, GPS.
Welcome back to the Ambassador as we break down the developments for you and get the bigger picture on what's happening globally. Now, the Vatican on Thursday opened the most solemn period of Holy Week of Easter, with the recovering Pope Francis largely on the sidelines. Cardinals have been designated to take his role, presiding over the most important liturgical services leading up to the Easter. GBS reporter Victor Odun has these from Italy.
Ricordiamo quella parola nell'ordinazione.
This is Cardinal Calcagno leading the Mass to open the Holy Week of Easter. Yesterday at St. Peter's Square at the Vatican, with the Pope glaringly absent. Pope Francis, who is still recovering from a bout of pneumonia, had dedicated the most demanding Holy Week liturgical celebrations to the cardinals whom he had handpicked, though the Vatican says the Pope himself composed the meditations to be read aloud during the Via Crucis, the Way of the Cross, procession on Friday night at Rome's Colosseum.
Credere sì, credere che Dio non fallisce con me. Dio non fallisce mai.
It remains to be seen how the Pope will handle the Easter Sunday's traditional speech and imparting blessing, what is commonly known as the Ubi et Obi. Victor Udjung, the Ambassador.
Democratic United States Senator Chris Van Hollen was denied access to Kilma Abrego Garcia, who was deported under controversial circumstances and is currently being held in a notorious prison in El Salvador. Van Hollen, who had traveled to the country to advocate for Abrego Garcia release, was informed by El Salvador's vice president that he could not meet or speak with Abrego. Abdihamid Ali has more.
Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen arrived in El Salvador to secure the release of Abrego Garcia and highlight the human rights violations surrounding his case. However, upon meeting Vice President Ulloa, the senator was told that the Salvadorian government will not authorize any contact with the detained man. According to Van Hollen, Ulloa explained that El Salvador's decision to keep Abrego Garcia locked up was linked to U.S. financial support. In response, the senator questioned why American taxpayers were funding the incarceration of someone who was, in his view, wrongfully abducted and had committed no crime. This remark comes after a legal ruling that Abrego Garcia's deportation carried out by the Trump administration was a mistake due to administrative error.
And I won't stop trying, and I can assure the President, the Vice President, that I may be the first United States Senator to visit El Salvador on this issue. but there will be more, and there will be more members of Congress coming.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt criticized Van Hollen's actions.
Maryland Democrat Senator Chris Van Hollen rushed to Dulles Airport this morning to fly to El Salvador, potentially using taxpayer dollars to demand the release of deported illegal alien MS-13 terrorist. The Democrats and the media in this room have continually and wrongly labeled Kilmar Abrego Garcia as a Maryland father. There is no Maryland father. Let me reiterate, Kilmar Abrego Garcia is an illegal alien, MS-13 gang member and foreign terrorist who was deported back to his home country.
Abrego Garcia's lawyer denied Kilmar being associated with the MS-13 gang. The U.S. Supreme Court had already ruled that Abrego Garcia's deportation was unlawful, ordering his return. The U.S. Department of Homeland Security has stated it lacks the authority to intervene. Abrego is held in one of the most notorious prisons in Central America. The prison holds dangerous MS-13 gang members who terrorized El Salvador by committing crimes of murder and rape. As a result, El Salvador has become one of the safest countries in the American continent. The ongoing situation highlights the complexities of international law and human rights, especially when it comes to deportation and the treatment of individuals accused of gang affiliations. This is Abdihamid Ali, GBS News.
Now, in heartbreaking news, Gabonese international Aaron Bupenza has tragically passed away at the age of 28. The striker, who was playing for Zhejiang FC in China, reportedly fell from the 11th floor of his apartment building. Bupenza made a lasting impact on the field, particularly during the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations, and leaves behind a legacy as one of Gabon's top footballers.
Gabon international footballer Aaron Bupenza has tragically passed away at the age of 28. The Gabon Football Association confirmed he fell from the 11th floor of his apartment in China, where he played for Zhejiang FC in the Chinese Super League. Bupenza was widely remembered for his standout performances during the 2021 Africa Cup of Nations in Cameroon. Bupenza's career saw him play across several countries, including the United States, Romania, and Turkey, before moving to China in 2025. Known for his adaptability, he impressed at each club he joined, most recently making his mark at Zhejiang FC. With 35 caps and 8 goals for Gabon since 2016, Bupenza's legacy in football is undeniable. His death is under investigation, and fans worldwide mourn the loss of a talented and beloved player. Elvin Muyodi, GBS Sports.
A federal judge has ruled that Trump administration officials may face criminal contempt charges for violating a court order that halted the deportation of alleged Venezuela gang members. A United States district judge filed a probe cause that official internationally disgraded his March order, which blocked deportations under the 1798 Aliens Enemy Act. The ruling escalates tensions between the judicial and executive branches, with the administration now facing a deadline to comply or face legal consequences. Here is more on the scene.
The judge ruling marks a significant development in the ongoing legal battle over the deportation of individuals, mostly Venezuelans, accused of gang affiliations. Despite the court's order to stop these deportations, Trump administration continues its actions. The judge called a willful disregard of his instructions. Many of the deported individuals' lawyers argue that their clients were not given a chance to challenge the U.S. government's allegations that they were gang members. In a rare move, the judge set an April 23rd deadline for the administration to either comply with his order or identify those responsible for ignoring it, potentially leading to a criminal prosecution. The Trump administration, however, has appealed the decision, with the Justice Department accusing the judge of overstepping his authority. As the case moves to higher courts, legal experts see this as a critical test for the checks and balances of the U.S. government. It remains to be seen if the threat of criminal contempt will push the Trump administration to comply. This is Abdi Hamid Ali, GBS News.
Now, on the current news on sports, international sports, Manchester United is making a bold call ahead of the high-stakes Europa League Qatar final match with Lyon, after a wave of criticism and a wicket on the sidelines against Newcastle United in the Premier League. Adri Onana is back in goal. Here is more on the decision and what it means for United European hopes. We will bring more on that Europa League, but now, that's all for today. With me, your Ambassador Paul Mathenge on the Ambassador 1 p.m. Follow all of our stories at GBS TV. Is updated through the day. We meet every Thursday and Friday as we debunk global diplomacy and geopolitics. Thank you for your time and company.
Everywhere, GBS.